Hello, all. Thanks for listening to Now. We're talking with Doug Pagitt. My conversation today is with Diana Butler Bass. She's the author of the book Grateful, The Transformative Power of Giving Thanks. Now, before you say to yourself, I'm not into all that gratefulness, self-help talk, you're going to be interested in this one. I raised those questions with Diana. I think you're going to like it. I think you're going to like her take on it. She ended up becoming a more grateful person, she said in the interview, while writing the book, which she wrote in the first 100 days of the Trump administration. And she's not a fan. So it was a practice that she said at the end of the interview saved her life and changed her, the practice of gratefulness. So I think you're going to like it. Here it is, my conversation with my friend Diana Butler Bass. You can find her at dianabutlerbass.com. You can find more about becoming a Patreon subscriber and one of the funders of all this goodness over at dougpagitt.com. $13 a month gets you not only all this, but all the other good treats. So here it is, my conversation with Diana. Hey, everyone. Doug Pagitt here with Diana Butler Bass, author of Grateful. Well, I've been setting this up in my mind all day, Diana. Grateful to have you on the podcast.
Well, it's really good to talk with you, Doug, especially on Good Friday. It feels like kind of a special.
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you for being willing to squeeze it in on such an important day. So you are an author of great renown, and you were saying before we got started here that this is book number 10.
10.
That is a big deal.
Yeah.
Congratulations. Is this going to be it? You're gonna do 10 and then say I'm going to call it quits. Let's leave it at 10, or do you have more in the hopper?
Well, I always have plenty of ideas for books, and I have one more contract to fulfill with Harper One. Before then, we decide what to do after that. So I think I'll be around for a little bit. I'm planning on sticking around about as long as Phyllis Tickle, maybe a little longer.
Oh, good. Well, we just talked about Phyllis last week, so I hope that I'm around long enough to talk with someone who does your biography after you've lived a long life. That'd be a great thing. Okay, Diana, you've written a book called Grateful, The Transformative Power of Giving Thanks. Mm-hmm. And it's a bit of a change for you. The last two books you've done, I feel like to me, they're a little bit of a different approach. The cover of this book mentions your previous one called Grounded. You're known for lots of commentary on churches, church history, church commentary, church and culture. And this book, Grateful, is a little different than that. It's a little more about the personal life and how a person can experience a more fulfilled, transformative life through gratefulness. Is that a fair way to describe your writing legacy and what you've done in this book?
Well, I think that you put your finger right on it when you say that the earlier books I wrote were about churches and church life and church history. There was a common word you used there.
Yeah.
It was all church.
Church stuff, yes.
And when I wrote Christianity After Religion, which was actually written in 2010, it came out in 2012, me, like everybody else, was finally paying profound attention to the fact that so many people were leaving church. Mm-hmm. So one of my real concerns in recent years has been, what is that going to mean for the spiritual practices we've associated with religious traditions? What's it going to mean for biblical storytelling? What's it going to mean for theology? And so what I've been trying to do in my more recent books is not trying, because what did Yoda say? You either try or you do.
Yeah, that's right.
So I'm just doing this.
Just doing it. Yeah.
I'm not trying anything. But I'm putting out into a broader conversation in the world, things that used to stay in the church.
Yeah.
And so in that way, people who are still interested in churches or still go to churches will find great benefit from what I'm doing, because it's a lot of things that they care about. But I'm also reaching toward new audiences of people who are frustrated or angry or beyond the walls of a church right now.
And I bring that up because it's helpful if people know some of your other work. They might think that, I don't know, they could assume it's a book about churches or faith communities that are living gratefully or something. But this is about, this is helpful to a person who wants to experience the transformative power of being thankful. So
Right.
I really appreciated the prologue, and I normally don't tell people make questions out of the comments in the first sentence of the prologue because it makes it sound like you didn't read the rest of the book. But I really appreciated the fact that you said, I can't remember exactly how it went, but something like, I got a thank you note about a thank you note and then didn't know when the thank you note cycle is supposed to stop. And I have thought that very thought before, how long you keep a thank you note and do you bring it up to someone when you got one from them? And I bring all that, I think maybe you did too, because there is this thing between gratefulness and thankfulness. And there's this weird thing in our culture. We do it with children all the time where it's a reflexive kind of, well, just say thank you. And to some people, it just seems like it's so meaningful and it's so deep and it's so authentic. And to others of us, maybe myself included, it can feel a little forced, that kind of rote thankfulness. So do you think there's some difference between gratefulness, like a grateful transformative power, and the act of people that are really good at saying thanks and thank you and like that? Do you think there's something different between those two ideas?
Yes. What I try to lay out at the very beginning of the book, look at that, I did it again. I said try. What I lay out in the beginning of the book is the fact that I've always struggled with obligatory forms of gratitude. And my mother, of course, was of the generation where that was super important. And it always made me feel like a failure, that I didn't really know how to write thank you notes. So it became a place where I felt really judged, and I kind of gave up on thinking of myself as a grateful person or as a person who was terribly good with giving thanks. I got sort of along in the timeline, and a couple of different things made me want to reassess that. And one was, I was having my own sort of struggles with being able to appreciate my life as it has unfolded instead of wishing that I had some different things happen in my life. And as soon as you start envying what you don't have and not appreciating what you do have, you're in that's kind of rocky territory for a mature spiritual life. Yeah. That leads to cynicism and resentment, rather than growing older and wiser into a life of gratitude. And so I sort of looked at myself honestly, about all that. And then I just was also paying attention to the fact that, where is gratitude in our culture right now, which is a theme that comes up in the book. So from all those things, the internal of my own wondering and then the external of what was happening in our world, I began to realize that gratitude was much more than what I had thought. And so in the first chapter, in that prologue, as you know, since you've read it, I lay out a model of gratefulness, of gratitude, that includes 4 different styles of thankfulness that I think each one of us has a tendency to lean towards one of those styles or preference one of those styles over the other 3. And those are styles of personal feelings related to gratitude and personal ethics related to gratitude. So that's 1 and 2. Or we tend to emphasize communal feelings of gratitude or communal ethics of gratitude. So that's 3 and 4. So it becomes a pie-shaped model in the book. Yeah, it becomes the structure of the book too. I mean, those become the sections that you engage with this. Do you think it's possible that some people are like personally thankful at an emotional level, but they're not really all that concerned about a kind of a collective gratefulness? Or do you think some people could be really curmudgeon-y in their own personal spirit, but carry a gratefulness for the larger whole? I do think so. Interestingly enough, a week ago, I was with a West Star Institute, which is the group of biblical scholars who are most known for the Jesus Seminar, and they were having their big national conference. It was a great meeting. I was presenting about this book, and one guy came up to me afterwards, and he said, "Well, gratitude has nothing to do with the communal." I was really surprised by that, because I think of Jesus Seminar people as being kind of liberal.
Right.
But he was like some sort of Jesus seminar libertarian, which is really weird. And he didn't want
everyone to their own thanks.
That's right. He didn't want to hear anything about community. He was like so offended by the idea that gratitude could ever be a communal practice or a political practice. So I definitely know that exists because I ran into it just a week ago.
Yeah.
And the other one, I suppose, theoretically is possible. I suppose that there really could be people who are very good at sort of public expressions or public practices of Thanksgiving, but whose own hearts are kind of diminished in the personal realm about that. I would think an example would be, say, a person who realizes that they've been given a lot of gifts, maybe someone who's very wealthy, and the way that they give back is to support the United Way or some other kind of giving back.
Right. They're really committed to, they're grateful people, if not for the grace of God, there go I. But they're, they're personally curmudgeon-y or owly. Right. So I've had this feeling, even when I saw your book, which, because it was you, I was like, no, that's safe. But if I just saw a book called Grateful or a book on gratefulness, there's part of me that tends to be like, oh, there's these people who that's just their thing. Like they're just the grateful spirited people. Like some of us are a quick laugh or we have a sassy mouth or we're, some people are just really kind. Some people are just super grateful and other people aren't. But gratefulness often, this is why you want to get your take on it, feels like it's one of those things that everyone ought to develop, even if you're not temperamentally bent that way. And I think that might be for good reason. Like maybe there really are things that we should develop in us beyond our personal temperament. But normally people who write books on gratefulness would be people who are just sort of well known for that, or that's their thing. Like that's the thing they're up to in life and that's what they do. And they're kind of a chipper, grateful, here we go camper kind of attitude. I'm being biased here.
I don't know that anybody would think of me naturally in those ways.
Well, I was going to say this. I was going to say that I've known you a lot of years, and not that I've ever thought you to be ungrateful, but I've never put you in the category of sort of the gratefulness champs, hey, what you got to do? It's all about, gratitude's all about the attitude. You know what I'm getting at? That kind of thing. That doesn't.
The poster behind me does not say "in all things give thanks" or something like that.
Perfect. That kind of thing. So, what got you into writing about and thinking about and caring about this particular topic? If it hasn't been your life project to be someone who writes about gratefulness and.
Well, it was that shortfall, first of all, just kind of doing midlife reflection and assessing what I was strong with, in terms of spiritual practices and where I was weaker.
So you're actually saying that you saw a sense in yourself, you wanted to develop greater gratefulness. So
yes.
And now that's unusual. People might not know that some of us as authors do that we're writing toward the life we want to live. Yes, if we could only, there's a Jackson Brown line, if I could only live the life that I sing in my songs, he says. Some people write out of their expertise and that they've accomplished something, and then they're now presenting a portion of that in their public writing. And others are and maybe different times people do different things. They're writing toward the life they want to live. You're saying this book is closer to that writing toward the life that you are trying to live.
Yeah, I've written any number of books that came out of my expertise, dissertation, books about congregational development, church history, those things I'm an expert in. And I love sharing things that I know that I'm good at. But this book starts out with a chapter that's framed as a confession of an ingrate. And so I actually say out front, I'm not very good at this. And I place myself in community with my readers who may also feel like they struggle. One of my favorite parts of the research for this book, and it is something that inspired me to go deeper in it, was the fact that in the fall of 2015, Pew Research Center. Now this sounds so like me.
There you go. Now we're back on track.
I know. She's quoting data. Thank goodness,
3 years ago, there was a survey, and the data says, "There's the Diana we've come to love."
I love data. So anyway, so I found this survey, and the survey was, the question on the survey was, have you in the last week felt a strong sense of gratitude? And the answer was 78% of Americans said that in the week previous to being asked the question, they had indeed felt a strong sense of gratitude. And that number was like, my jaw just like, no way.
You thought it would be lower than that?
Yeah, I thought it would be lower than that because I had done just enough research and, seen enough Oprah programs to know that when people are grateful people, you're less stressed, you're healthier, you have an overall sense of happiness, kind of like what you're talking about, as the people who are chipper and that you have deeper social ties. And so I saw this survey in November of 2015, and shortly thereafter, there was another survey. It was like 2 or 3 days later, actually, from Public Religion Research. And they were looking at the emotional complexity of the American electorate going into the 2016 election. And that survey discovered that Americans were angrier, less hopeful, and more divided than ever. And so I looked at these two surveys, side by side, and I knew that something was wrong because the social science of gratitude says that if you're grateful, you're not angry. As a matter of fact, those two things neuroscientists tell us cannot exist in the same brain. Is that if you're grateful, you're functioning out of your neocortex, the higher thinking part of your brain, and fear recedes and literally stays way back here down in the reptilian part of your brain. And so those two things cannot function at the same time. You have to pick one over the other. And so what happened in those two surveys is said that Americans were both more incredibly grateful and incredibly fearful. And I couldn't understand that. And that made me crazy. And so so that's when I decided that this book was really important to not only my own sense of maturity and growth as a person, as an author, as somebody whose life needed to be redirected towards gratitude, but I began to wonder if even those people who say they are grateful needed a much deeper understanding.
So was your take on that then to say, well, those people actually aren't grateful, or was your take to say, well, I think people are living with both an internal sense of gratefulness and a very disillusioned and frustrated sense in the world?
What I say in the book is that people are not allowing gratitude to be as deep and thick and profound as it really can be in their own lives and in the world. And the comparison that I make at the very beginning of the book is to Dietrich Bonhoeffer's conversation about grace in the 1930s, where clearly German Lutherans believed in grace. If you took a survey of Germans in 1933 and asked them if they had some sense of grace in the universe or a church or whatever it was in the previous week, probably 80% of them would say yes, that they had. But then Bonhoeffer pushes that, and he says, well, you've cheapened it. And I think that might be what we're living with is a very thin sense of gratitude.
When someone's asked in a survey, are you a grateful person? They're like, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'm grateful. I say thanks. It's sort of become that cultural obligatory thing that you mentioned earlier.
Right. Or you take your mom's on the other end of the phone, and if the survey when the survey taker is asking you the question, she can overhear what you're saying, and so you don't want your mother to think that you're an ingrate. So
they're answering the question the same way you were writing the book, aspirationally. They're trying to be grateful. I do think there's a lot about that in surveys, and I think it impacts a lot of the way we use surveys. That people answer them toward the person they want to be, not toward the person that they have been. I think that's true for a lot of us. Our therapists tend to tell us that, right? The self-report is often the person you would like to be, and that's really important. That's a good part. Okay, so here's my other question for you on gratefulness. It feels like there's a difference between the kinds of people that are grateful and the kinds of people who want to change the world. So to put it too starkly, some of us don't like the way things are in the world. We want it to be different. So we're angling, we're working, we are conjuring up ideas and people. We're trying to change the public opinion. There's something we want to be different. And if we're asked to be grateful, that feels like you're being asked to just take it as it is, find the good in everything, and sort of, turn down your heat on the boil a little bit and instead become grateful for what is and don't be so interested in changing things. And some of us, for our faith or where we are in the world right now, we want the world to be different and we want to see this like fiery activism, and gratefulness can feel like the antithesis to that.
Yeah, and I struggled with that in the book. But I think that your question is, and I'm sorry to say this to you, my dear friend, but it's kind of a white question.
Okay.
Because
I am a white guy. People don't know that if they're watching on the video, but
right. But one of the things that is absolutely the case in American history is that communities that were at the bottom of social pyramids that tried to use gratitude against them are often communities of great visions of social justice and also profound communities of gratitude. And so I think that, for example, African-American Christianity really teaches a lot about the intersection between justice and gratitude. And if we think about slavery, and this is not in the book, but, when somebody asks me this question, I think it's a great way to explore some of this history, is that the white people, the culture of the masters was always telling slaves that they should be grateful. You should be grateful because we give you clothes, even if they're rags. We give you food, even if they're crumbs. We put a roof over your head, even if it leaks. And so shut up and appreciate.
Appreciate
the good gifts. Appreciate the good gifts that you have. And so African-American slave communities learned very quickly to say thank you, on one hand, to that white patriarchal control vision of gratitude. But then, on the other hand, in their own communities, in their circles of worship, their circles of faith, the way they read the Bible, is that thankfulness really explodes as a component of justice. And the way that functions is that God owns everything, that the masters don't really own this stuff, that God really owns everything. And that the people who are in the community who happen to be enslaved at this particular moment, that they have immediate connection and immediate relationship with God. And in that, no matter what the master says, no matter what the master does, there is joy, there is a deep sense of abundance, there is an empowerment of gratitude that leads towards the idea of the Exodus and liberation. And so communities that are on the shorter end of gratitude being used against them have often discovered that gratitude is actually deeply empowering. And the first person to really point that out to me was, I asked Otis Moss and Reggie Williams both about how Thanksgiving functioned in African-American theology. And what was fascinating is that they didn't give me a book, but instead they both pointed me towards the music.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And as soon as they did that, I realized, oh my gosh, well, of course, the music develops as the sort of the theological, emotional piece under slavery that the white community didn't have very much access to. And it was in the music that Thanksgiving really.
Yeah, and that really is this intersection of that kind of that communal ethic that the section that you write about in the book. Yeah, I can really see that powerfully.
I think and it's not true, for every person of color in America,
right?
But there are sort of there's theological emphases in these different communities, and certainly gratitude and justice go together much more closely in African-American Christianity.
Yeah, and I know you know this because you're engaged with lots of change work in the United States right now across a lot of different ethnic and ethnically intersecting communities. There's real debate in the country about an attitude of we're in this together and we should be grateful for the progress that has been made versus we should be not giving into the limited sense of goodness that we see. We should be striving for it even harder. And on the street or in the meetings or at the rally, you can feel that tug and pull. And I've been in lots of conversations with leaders where it can, with other leaders, other organizers, where a sense of gratefulness on the ground in the moment feels like it's trying to squelch the fire. So even though the history sort of, you can look back and see how it's been well curated, that pressure point continues to come up, doesn't it? Like in our world, it stays a real hot button kind of strain.
Yeah, in the book I actually talk about Donald Trump.
Yeah, that's where I want to go next.
Yeah, it's in the back part of the book, so we were talking just about the front. But the book arcs from my own struggle with gratitude and that question that I lay out in the first couple pages of, do you write a thank you note for a thank you note when you've gotten a thank you note? And it arcs all the way over to the idea of a politics of gratitude. Yeah. And so one of the things that is going on in our culture today that I think is invisible to many people as we're having an argument over the nature of gratitude. Yes. Yeah. And Donald Trump is trying to use gratitude as an instrument to control us. And what he imagines, he sets himself up, I think in his own mind, as a untouched benefactor. That is, he was given, he said this in many of his speeches, almost all of which I listened to in research for this book. Wow. Oh, I know. I have to admit that in public now. DJT in your head right there. Yeah. And so everybody thinks I just don't like Trump. I actually paid a lot of deep attention. I listen to him every night before I go to bed on all the news things that I watch. I'm like, I gotta quit sleeping with Donald Trump in my head. But so Trump set himself up in his own mind and in his campaign as the untouched benefactor. That is, he didn't receive any money from anyone. Yeah, right. He would say, I'm wealthy, I don't owe anybody anything, and therefore I can be the best president ever because I'm not in any kind of quid pro quo, tit for tat kind of arrangement. So I'm untouched by debts of gratitude. Yeah. And so then, because he's a pure benefactor, the idea was that he would get in there and he would get all of the people who were the wrong beneficiaries out of the system, remove the bad beneficiaries and the moochers. Yeah. And that he would provide his benefits to the right people. And so it's very political. It's very transactional. And if you listen to him now, not just in his pre-election speeches, but now, one of the things he loves doing is calling people ingrates. And so you go on his Twitter page and sure. Yeah. Hurricane Maria, he called the mayor of San Juan an ingrate. Yeah. And then the UCLA basketball players didn't thank him enough when he got them out of trouble in China. And he had the cabinet go around and they all had to give their thanks and praise of gratitude. And so I literally could give you a half an hour worth of examples. Yeah, that's a whole leadership style that I've seen in other kinds of leaders too. They do this kind of express your thanks, homage sort of odd thing. Right. Yeah. And what happens there is that gratitude becomes a weapon against your enemies. Yes. Yeah. And a way of controlling other people. And so when you talk about it, you're talking now about how it functions in social justice. And it's not weaponized in that same deep sense that Trump weaponizes it, but it also can be a stopper. Yeah, for sure. It just sort of says, okay, well, we have to be grateful. We have to be grateful. And then people get mad because they feel like they're being controlled. Right. And that's exactly what it is. It's a mechanism of control, whether it's used in a really malicious sense that Trump uses it, or if it's used in a kind of a spiritualized, accidental sense. Yeah. in the way it's often used in church circles. It's
right.
still,
Like, can't you just be present with things? Can't you just be satisfied with the way they are? Why do you have to change things all the time?
right.
It seems to be working. I don't know why you can't be more like, no one uses the word grateful or gratitude specifically in those kinds of critiques. It's much more subtle, right? It's much more, can't you just be happy with what we have and not think about remodeling the kitchen? Can't a kid just eat what's on the plate and be thankful? Don't they know there's people that don't have this kind of thing? Why do they need to say, is there something else we can have for dinner? And over time, it feels like this thing develops in our brains that says either be satisfied and grateful, or look at how the world could be different. And at that real subtle kind of level, gratefulness and gratitude and thankfulness gets weaponized. I like the way you phrase that. And it shouldn't be. And I think that's what your book's really helpful for people. So I bring all that up because I know for people who already appreciate gratefulness and gratitude and all, they're going to be like, oh, there's a book on gratefulness. I'm all in. It's that other part of the audience that are like, I don't know that's, and other than this conversation, you don't get to sit around and talk to people about like, I'm not a big fan of gratefulness. I think it gets overused sometimes, right?
Right.
What kind of guy sits around and talks about that?
I've sometimes described this book to friends or, before it came out, or it comes out early next week, as a radical political theology disguised as a self-help book.
Yeah, that's great. Talk a little bit about that, because that's a great way to frame the book. It's a radical
political theology disguised as a self-help book.
Yeah, nice.
And so we've been talking about the political part of it, and to that place where gratitude becomes the stopper or the weapon. The way that works is it's always out of a framework of scarcity.
Yes.
That is, there are few gifts in the universe and that they're controlled by a few people and that we each have to get ours. And so when you say to the child, oh, be grateful for the food on your plate, because there are people who are starving, that's a way of talking about gratitude that comes out of a vision of scarcity. There's not enough food in the world. You got
yours. You should be happy.
So you should be happy that food is on your plate, and you don't have to be like those people over there who don't have any food on their plate. But that, oh my gosh, here we are on Good Friday. That's not the vision at all of the New Testament. The vision of the New Testament in gratitude is that we live in a universe of abundance because God is the creator. And every good gift comes from God. And every gift is good. Yes. So we have God, who is good, who is the creator, who in the theological frameworks that I embrace is not just a one-time creator, but is an ongoing creator who's always in the process of making goodness, making compassion, and that the whole of the universe is constantly doing that job of creating. And so, Wendell Berry, in his beautiful line, says of this, everything we need is here. And that's my favorite line of abundance. Everything we need is here. So do we function out of gratitude with the idea of scarcity, whether we're Donald Trump or the mother saying, eat your food on your plate because there are children who are starving in Africa? Or do we function out of a vision of abundance, which says, oh my gosh, I have a full plate. I want everybody else to have a full plate.
Yes. Yeah.
And everybody else can have a full plate.
Yeah.
And so in that sense, that kind of gratitude becomes the opening of heart and hand, and a sort of it becomes the passion behind the doing of justice, to make sure that the gifts of abundance, that the gifts of all of creation are spread out to every single human being in such a way that all have access to food and protection and a life of dignity and respect. And as long as we live in a structure of scarcity, it becomes a zero-sum game. But if we understand that it really is about abundance, it becomes not zero-sum, but it becomes like a Thanksgiving table where everyone is literally passing around the plates all the time without worry that the dish is ever going to empty.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and that really gives people an alternative to the frustration they feel about the world or their own or their life or whatever, and not have that be the antithesis to them being grateful. You could be a grateful person and still feel that you want the frustration to go away. That one doesn't have to simply resign themselves to the way things are, or that they're not mutually exclusive. That your desire and passion for something more or something different is not opposite of being grateful.
I don't think that gratitude ever really functions to satisfy the soul regarding injustice. What gratitude, the way gratitude works to satisfy, is by pointing out to those of us who actually have a lot that we really do have a lot. And so for me, just on a deeply personal level, it functions that way. Part of my frustration, and I'm sure you probably feel this way, is that you get to midlife. I've written 10 books. It sounds really petty, but not one of those books has ever been on the New York Times bestseller list,
right.
And it sounds stupid, but yet the whole sort of cultural pattern of what the expectations are for a white person like me who is an author is that I should achieve certain kinds of milestones in my professional life.
Yeah.
And I've never achieved those.
Yeah. Yes.
and yet my life is beautiful. My words give life to people. I've been able to take care of my family with a decent wage paid for my writing and my speaking.
Yeah.
And so what happens is when I started thinking about the fact that I was getting angry about these sort of milestones that I felt like I should have achieved, and got upset when I saw that friends of mine did achieve them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it tells you it is achievable. I felt that too.
Yeah, because it tells you it's not just a myth; it's somebody can do it. But I felt bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
And so what happened when I applied gratitude in that framework, as a person who has a relative amount of privilege and who has been successful in her vocation, I went, oh my gosh, it was very humbling to be. And so as soon as I began to really be grateful for what has happened in my life, it wasn't to say, I should stop being ambitious, but it was saying you should stop envying. And as soon as you can stop doing that, then I was able to be very grateful to my friends who have achieved more than me.
Yeah, yeah.
And it felt like I was being put back in kind of a circle of wholeness with God and with my colleagues in a way that I didn't have to live with my own regrets. And I think that a lot of us feel those kinds of things professionally.
Right. Yeah.
So in that sense, being grateful does satisfy the soul.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But when I started understanding gratitude in relationship to what was going on with politics, gratitude unsettled me.
Yes, right.
And it made me realize that there was more of a need for me to be deeply aware of injustice in the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your gratefulness fueled you to say it's not a fair deal for everyone. It's not.
That's right.
It's not a full table.
And I really do want that
yes.
fair, that table
yes.
Set in the wilderness for everyone.
Yeah.
And so, so I think that gratitude is a very complex thing that both does settle our souls in the right places as individuals, and then it disturbs us and disrupts us.
Yeah.
In the places where we really, truly need that disruption.
Yeah, it seems to be one of those qualities, human qualities, that all the great master teachers and philosophers and instructors have encouraged people to pursue, and yet we almost all still need to be encouraged to take note of it and to pursue it. It's a curious human experience, isn't it?
It's easy to take for granted.
Yeah.
And especially, you say, oh, yeah, I felt grateful, or I'm good at writing thank you notes, or, I give my tithe to church, or
yes.
I, feed the hungry once a year at Thanksgiving. And so gratitude is so much more than that. It involves those things, but it's something.
Yeah, it sort of reminds me of Jesus's comments about prayer, right? Where it would be, put your don't do it outwardly in front of other people because somehow that's just going to conflict with what you're doing. I think about myself like when I'm at it's really embarrassing, but like if I'm at a counter service place, like a coffee shop or something, and I get change back, and I'm going to put money in the change in the tip jar. I find myself being like, why are you waiting right now? Are you waiting for the server person to turn around and make sure they see you putting it in there? Because that's one of those tangible acts, right? Like, well, I don't want to be grateful and tip well and not get credit for it. Like there's this weird thing, right, that can go on and where it can almost turn on yourself, where it becomes another act of external kind of performance, which is the very thing I think your book does so well at getting at, is to say it can be the alternative to that, as opposed to it being the thing you do. And I'm sure there's people who are really good at writing thank you notes who feel that it's a burden, and they feel like I just have to do it. I can't even imagine not doing it, and it weighs on them, or that they feel that they're not being grateful. Because a lot of people still hold a little magic genie philosophy in their head. If you behave right, the world's going to treat you right. And it comes under a lot of names and a lot of banners. Whatever you put out in the world sort of comes back to you, or some kind of karma thing, or some kind of rewarding or punishing God narrative, or however it goes. So there's people who they'll look at their lives and think, wow, things aren't going really my way. Let me go down the checklist of the things that I could fix so that I kind of get my life better. Well, I should be more grateful. That's an easy one. I'll start working at that. You know what I mean? Like it's so rooty. It's so rooty, like to dig around and figure out, where's this all coming from? Why are we behaving the way we are? We're a curious lot, human beings.
Well, I actually, I feel like this is one of the places where, I didn't know much before I wrote this book. I mean, I kind of, if anybody would have asked me to explain what I thought gratitude was or what gratefulness was, I would have had a pretty thin or surface definition. And now I think it's one of the most important things. And so,
how about that?
You might not have thought of me as being the super gratitude type, but every time we're together from here on out, you're going to see the grateful Diana.
Well, thank you, Diana. I will give you the. Did anyone suggest you should call it the year of living gratefully and put it into the genre of the year of books? Where
there are a couple of those already.
Is that right? There's a year of living gratefully.
There are, and when I wrote the book, I self-consciously said to myself, to my own self, I said, "Self, the last thing the world needs is another gratitude book by a privileged white lady. So do something different."
Do something.
And it took me to this amazing place of understanding my own shortfall, my own failings, and where humility is so necessary for us to be whole. Yeah. And then also gave profound insights about the political moment that we live in. And I feel rather empowered, and I'm not afraid of Donald Trump. Whereas the first 8 weeks I was cowered under a blanket in my bed.
Yeah, I remember we were together shortly after, in January of the inauguration. And I was feeling, I haven't gotten over it as well as you have, but I remember it's terrifying. And gratefulness, I guess you're saying, is something that can help people to set aside that way of feeling and living and being.
Yeah. It worked that way for me.
Good.
Because I wrote the book in the first 100 days of Donald Trump being president.
Yeah, at least you were busy during that time. You had something to keep your mind occupied. Good for you.
Well, it was startling because I did not feel grateful at all. And that's when I learned its real power, is when I did not feel grateful and had to go into my office 5-6 hours a day and read about and write about gratitude. And it became the pathway for me through the depression, the fear, and the pain.
Yeah. Well,
my husband Richard says it saved me.
Really?
Yeah, that's what he always says. He said this book saved your life, and he's right.
Well, I am grateful for grateful. That's doubly grateful. Congratulations! And are you going to be around? Are you touring the country? Are you going to be doing the things where people could run into you and say hello?
I am. For the next 2 months, I'm on the road a lot. People can find those dates on my website.
DianaButlerBass.com?
Yeah, DianaButlerBass.com. I'll be putting them up on Facebook.
Great.
On my website, they can sign up for a newsletter, and that has lots of stuff about the book tour in it. And, I'll see you on social media.
Yeah, and we'll see you at, we're going to be at a festival together in North Carolina in the summer. Me and you.
Yes, we will. Wild Goose.
The Wild Goose Festival.
Yeah.
All right, friend. Well, congratulations. It's really great.
Oh, thank
and
you.
People should buy it.
It's wonderful to talk to you, Doug.
Oh, very sweet of you. Thank you. And people should buy it. They can order it now, or they can pick it up on Tuesday at their local bookstore. Head over to the Barnes & Nobles or barnesandnoble.com. That's for you, Jane Love. And at Amazon.com as well.
Yeah,
is that right?
People pre-order anytime before Tuesday. You go onto my website, and there's a pre-order form. And HarperCollins actually has a little 7-day prayer guide of gratitude that they'll send you as a thank you gift.
If you do it ahead of time, or if you buy it via your website.
If you've bought it anywhere and have a receipt number, you can go to my website, fill in that receipt number on the form that's on my website.
Great.
And I wrote a little prayer guide, a little 7-day devotional to go along with the book.
Nice.
So you get a present.
Good for you. Yeah.
I'm grateful.
That's good. Because, the 78,000 words you wrote here wasn't enough. Could you give us just another 7 days worth? Don't you feel that way as an author?
Publishers are terrible.
I know it. I know you finish it how about a user guide? Honestly, just more work. How about if I go and read it to everyone at night? So I feel that's where I feel like as an author, if anyone's going to read this book, I think it's because I have to personally travel there and read sections of it to them. That's going to be the way it goes. Well, congratulations. I think people should do that. Go to Diana Butler Bass and get the DianaButlerBass.com and get the prayer, the 7-day prayer package or devotional package and all the rest. So, well, congratulations, friend.
Thank you. And Blessed Good Friday and Holy Saturday, and a happy Easter to you and to your family and congregation.
Yeah, thanks.
You're welcome.
Well, there you have it. Good conversation, huh? Hey, I don't always give you a little song at the end. Sometimes I do. This time I'm going to give you one from the Solomon's Porch community. I don't do this very often, but it really seems to fit. This is a song we often sing at the end of our gatherings, and it's called Lean Into. And I don't know, it kind of fit the conversation. I used it as the bumper music at the start, and thought you could listen to the whole song. So here it is. Ben Johnson, Corey Carlson, Javier San Pedro put this little number together.
Spirit, teach us, dance within us, enter our homes. Humbly seeking, she will see fit, teacher of souls. Lean into groan, may peace never leave you alone. God before us, active round us, often moving stones. Together send us, weeping for justice, no matter where we roam. Lean into groan, may peace never leave you. Consider what we've been shown, may the Spirit understand.